The evening didn't feel dangerous. There were lights on, doors still open, people moving through familiar spaces. The kind of routine that signals the day is almost over. At some point, one person stayed behind, not because anything felt wrong, but because nothing did. And by the time the silence was noticed, it was already too late to undo it. No alarms, no urgency, just the assumption that the routine would hold. Her name was Claire Bernal. Claire was expected to finish her shift, expected to lock up, expected to go home the way she always did. Nothing about that evening suggested it would end differently. Being alone didn't feel unusual. It was part of the routine, a quiet moment at the end of the day, the kind people rarely question. That sense of normalcy would become important later. Most people believe danger announces itself, with warning, with something that feels off. But this didn't. And that belief would be shattered. The place Claire was in wasn't isolated. It wasn't hidden. It was a familiar workplace, designed for safety, not threat. When she didn't arrive home, concern didn't come all at once. Came slowly, hidden behind assumptions people wanted to believe. Someone else had been part of her routine, close enough to know her schedule, close enough to know when she'd be alone. What investigators would uncover later would challenge everything people believed about safety in ordinary places. This wasn't a random interruption. It was something that grew out of familiarity and access. Timelines mattered, movement mattered, and the difference between routine and danger became painfully clear. To understand what happened to Claire Bernal, you have to look closely at the moment routine stopped protecting her, and why no one saw it coming. Claire Bernal was 22 years old. She worked as a beauty consultant, a role that placed her at the center of the store's energy, welcoming customers, offering guidance, and moving easily between counters filled with glass bottles, soft lighting, and familiar routines. It was work that required attentiveness and composure. Claire was known for both. Friends and colleagues described her as warm, focused, and quietly assured. She took pride in what she did. She paid attention to detail. She listened when people spoke. There was an ease to how she carried herself, professional without being distant, friendly without being careless. She had plans. She had momentum. She was at the stage of life where independence had begun to feel stable rather than fragile, where work was no longer temporary, but part of a larger direction. She was settling into adulthood with intention. Claire's days followed a dependable rhythm. She arrived at work on time. She knew her counters. She knew her products. She recognized regular customers and remembered their preferences. Knightsbridge was busy but structured, predictable. Security guards were visible at entrances. Colleagues worked within eyesight of one another. Movement was constant but orderly. It was not a place where danger felt close. That sense of safety mattered, because it shaped how people moved through the building, how they interacted, how they trusted the environment around them. The boundaries between personal life and professional space felt defined, reinforced by routine, protected by familiarity. Claire's life outside of work reflected that same stability. She lived in London. She maintained close relationships with friends and family. She had recently ended a romantic relationship, an emotional adjustment but not a crisis. There was no indication of fear. No sign she expected conflict to follow her into her workplace. Nothing that suggested she felt unsafe or watched. She did not warn colleagues. She did not alert supervisors. She did not hesitate to come in. She showed up to work as she always did. The people around her remember the calm. The store opened. Customers browsed. Staff moved between counters. Conversations overlapped softly beneath the hum of a working day. Everything appeared ordinary. What no one on the shop floor could see was how closely access and familiarity were about to matter. Because inside the same building, beyond the visible retail floor, someone else was moving through the space with purpose. Someone who knew the layout. Someone who understood the schedules. Someone who had worked there before. Someone whose presence did not immediately raise alarm because it did not appear unusual. Claire Bernal stood at her counter, focused on her work. She could not see what was coming. And in a place built on openness and trust, where visibility was assumed to equal safety, the next moment arrived without warning. A public space became the center of a tragedy. A routine day became irreversible. The sense of order people relied on fractured in an instant, altering not just a store but how workplace safety would be understood long after. The routine was intact, until it wasn't. To understand how the ordinary rhythm of that morning could fracture so suddenly, investigators had to look beyond the shop floor and into Claire Bernal's personal history. In the weeks before her death, Claire had ended a relationship with Michael Pesch. Pesch was not a stranger passing through her life. He worked as a security guard at Harvey Nichols, the same building where Claire spent her days. Their paths crossed naturally, repeatedly, and without drawing attention. The relationship had been brief, and by accounts later reviewed, it had ended quietly, at least on the surface. What mattered most was access. Michael Pesch knew the store's layout. He knew staff routines. He understood security procedures. His role granted him a familiarity that most people in the building did not have, and it allowed him to move through the space without raising suspicion. In a department store built on openness and customer flow, that familiarity blended easily into the background. After the relationship ended, Claire returned her focus to work and routine. There were no formal complaints filed. No requests for changes in schedule. No documented warnings issued to management or security. There was no public indication that she felt unsafe at her workplace. That absence would later be scrutinized, not as a failure on Claire's part, but as a reflection of how difficult it can be to recognize escalation when it is subtle, internal, and contained within private interactions. Investigators later reviewed employment records and internal protocols. Pesch was not barred from the premises. There were no restrictions placed on his movements within the store. He continued to work his assigned shifts. To colleagues and customers, he appeared indistinguishable from any other staff member performing routine duties. That overlap between personal history and professional access created a dangerous convergence. Because the boundaries that typically separate private relationships from public spaces did not exist here. The store was not neutral ground. It was familiar territory for both of them. And familiarity can obscure risk. On the morning of September 13th, there were no alarms raised. No confrontation reported. No intervention attempted. No indication that something was about to unfold. Claire stood at her counter, unaware that someone she once trusted was moving through the same building with a very different purpose. Investigators would later note that this was not a case of forced entry or random violence. It was a case shaped by proximity, by shared space, by unchallenged access, by a system that assumed visibility equaled safety. As the minutes passed inside Harvey Nichols, the conditions that made the store feel secure, the openness, the predictability, the familiarity, were quietly aligning in a way no one recognized in time. And when the violence came, it would come from within the structure itself, not from outside the doors, but from someone already inside. What happened next unfolded in moments, but those moments would define the case. On the shop floor at Harvey Nichols, customers continued to browse. Staff members remained at their counters. The environment was open, public, and busy in the way a department store is meant to be. Then the routine broke. At approximately 11:30 a.m., Michael Pesch approached Claire Bernal where she stood working. What followed was sudden and devastating. Pesch produced a firearm and shot Claire at close range. The sound cut through the store, sharp, unmistakable, and immediate. Panic spread instantly. Customers fled. Staff scrambled for safety. Security protocols activated too late to prevent what had already occurred. Within seconds, Pesch turned the weapon on himself. Emergency services were called immediately. Police and paramedics arrived within minutes, securing the scene and providing aid. Claire Bernal was pronounced dead at the store. Michael Pesch was also declared deceased shortly afterward from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The scene was sealed. What had been a public retail space became a forensic site. Investigators documented the location, recovered the firearm, and collected statements from staff and customers who had witnessed the shooting. There was no chase, no escape attempt, no ambiguity about who was responsible. Eyewitness accounts confirmed the sequence of events. Employees described seeing Pesch approach Claire directly. Customers recalled the abruptness, the lack of warning, the speed with which everything changed. The firearm was recovered at the scene. Employment records confirmed Pesch's identity and his role as a security guard at the store. His access to the building that morning was consistent with his work status. There was no dispute over the facts of the incident itself. What investigators focused on instead was how it had been possible. How someone with authorized access had been able to bring a weapon into a busy public space. How personal history had intersected with professional routine without triggering safeguards. How the familiarity of the environment had delayed recognition of danger. Because while the act itself was clear, the conditions that allowed it were not. The store had security. The suspect worked security. The space was designed for openness, not suspicion. And those factors, investigators would later note, created a gap that could not be closed in time. Claire Bernal's death was not a mystery in the traditional sense. There was no question of who had acted, but there were urgent questions about prevention, oversight, and the invisible escalation that can occur when personal relationships cross into professional spaces without boundaries. The answers to those questions would not come from a courtroom. They would come from what followed next. There would be no trial. With Michael Pesch dead at the scene, the criminal case ended almost as quickly as it began. Investigators did not prepare for court. Prosecutors did not assemble arguments. A jury was never selected. Instead, the work concluded quietly. Officers documented the sequence of events. Forensic teams secured and catalogued physical evidence. Authorities confirmed that no other individuals were involved. The facts were established with clarity. The responsibility was singular. And the legal process stopped abruptly. Not because justice had been denied, but because there was no one left to hold accountable within the system designed to do so. But for those left behind, the aftermath was only beginning. For Claire Bernal's family, there would be no courtroom reckoning, no opportunity to hear testimony, no chance to confront a defendant, no verdict that might offer even the smallest sense of resolution. The answers they received were factual, they were procedural, they were final, and yet, they did little to soften the loss of a young woman whose life ended in a place she believed was safe. Claire had gone to work that morning as she always did. She followed her routine. She carried out her responsibilities. She trusted the environment around her. That trust, ordinary, unremarkable, and deeply human, would later become central to how her death was understood. In the days following the shooting, the store reopened. The physical signs were removed. The space was cleaned. Operations resumed. But the emotional imprint remained. For co-workers who were present that day, the memory did not fade with time. It lingered in quiet moments, in familiar corners of the shop floor, in routines that once felt automatic and now carried weight. Beyond the immediate tragedy, Claire's death prompted broader reflection, particularly around workplace safety in environments where personal relationships intersect with professional access. Harvey Nichols conducted internal reviews of security procedures. Discussions emerged across the retail sector. Questions were raised about staff screening, access control, and the management of former relationships within shared workplaces. There were no sweeping legislative reforms directly tied to Claire's case. No single policy change that could be pointed to as a solution. But something did shift. The conversation changed. Claire's death forced uncomfortable questions into public view. Questions that did not fit neatly into existing threat models. How well do workplaces recognize risk when it is personal rather than random? How do organizations respond when familiarity masks escalation? And how many warning signs go unnoticed simply because they appear ordinary? These questions did not come with easy answers. They still don't. Claire Bernal was 22 years old. She was a young professional at the beginning of her career. She was known for her warmth, her reliability, and her quiet confidence. She was building a life defined by work, independence, and possibility. She is not remembered for how she died. She is remembered for how she lived, fully, ordinarily, and without expectation that violence would intrude on a normal day. Her story remains a reminder that safety is not only about physical barriers or visible threats. It is also about awareness, about boundaries, about systems willing to take subtle risks seriously before they escalate beyond control. The shop floor where Claire worked returned to normal operations. Customers came back. Music played again. Daily routines resumed. But for those who remember that day, for those who knew her, worked beside her, or simply understand what was lost, the space will never feel entirely the same. 'Cause some moments divide time. And once crossed, there is no true return to before. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.